It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo Larry Show. It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo Larry Show.
Good evening, my friends, and welcome once again to the Leo and Larry Show. We're so glad that you could join us this evening. My name is Leo Woodbury, and my co-host is Larry Smith, who unfortunately cannot be with us this evening. But as usual, we have amazing guests. This time we have a truly amazing guest who is known not only nationally but internationally, and she was a candidate for president during the 2020 election, and she has decided to throw her hat into the ring once again. Author, an amazing person, spiritual leader, no other than Maryanne Williamson, and she is joined also by Marcurius Bird, who is the South Carolina State Director. And so at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Maryanne Williamson, who is our special guest, so that you could tell us a little bit about yourself. Welcome once again.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend. It was wonderful to meet you last time when I was running, and it's great to see you again. It was very clear to me, it's always been very clear to me that you and I are aligned on a lot of issues, particularly your passion for the environment, all things really South Carolina and the United States. And I assume you would agree with me that many of the problems that we were concerned about 4 years ago, we're still concerned about. The forces that were heading the Republican Party, whether it is Donald Trump again or not, remains to be seen. But even if it is not a candidate that's Trump, it's reasonable to assume it will be a candidate who represents some of those views that many of us see as neo-authoritarian, even fascist. And so all of us who don't wish to see that are particularly concerned and hopeful and committed to a Democrat running in 2024 who will be able to beat all that back. I think that when Trump was defeated in 2020, and we're all grateful to President Biden for defeating him, all credit where credit is due. But I think 2024 will be a different race. I think that we had hoped that in 2020, by defeating Trump, that a certain malevolent period in our nation's history was over. But as it turns out, I think we can all see that it's more like a plague of hatred that had already metastasized. And I think I'm reminded of a quote from President Roosevelt, who said that we wouldn't have to worry about a fascist takeover in this country as long as democracy delivered on its blessings. And for me, what that means is that you can't just treat the disease, you have to boost your immune system. You can't just fight fascism. You have to look to your democracy and say, is democracy doing everything it can for its people right now? And I don't think it is. The citizens of every other advanced democracy have universal health care, and they have tuition-free college, which we had until the 1960s, and they have free childcare, and they have paid maternity and paternity leave, and they have a guaranteed livable wage, and they have guaranteed sick pay. So this idea of creeping towards those things and these incremental approaches, maybe later we're getting closer, but still always bottom line surrendering to the profit maximization goals of insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and big oil companies, food companies, agricultural companies, chemical companies, gun manufacturers, and defense contractors. It's always, their profits are always the bottom line. And we're always just arguing over the spoils, like everybody else is some serf. And that's not what this country is supposed to be. This country is supposed to have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, not of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. That is the message that will repair this country. And I don't think anything less than that will be the Republicans in 2024.
Okay, so basically, part of what you say, and a large part of what you say, and with your writings, you're the author of 60 or more books, and several of them have been on the New York Times best-selling list. Books like, Everyday Grace, Financial Abundance, and Healing the Soul of America. So you think this is a problem that goes beyond even economic um, manipulation. It goes even beyond what Martin Luther King called putting profits before people. But you think that, and I'm a reverend, so I have to be really transparent that I believe that one soul, one spirit has a definite impact on how we interact with people and what we do. So I'm just thinking about your book, and you can talk about it. So what you're talking about is healing the soul of America and the world. Am I correct?
Well, the soul is the inner life and the inner path of the heart. And the economic system that dominates our society today has no heart. It is an economic mindset that is completely disconnected. It's like everything the neck up. It has no sense of ethical responsibility to people, to children, to animals, to planet. And even Adam Smith, who was the original architect of free market capitalism, said that free market capitalism cannot exist outside an ethical context. But we have a system and a particular strain of capitalism, hyper-capitalism, crony capitalism, free market fundamentalism, trickle-down economics, so many names you can give to it, neoliberalism, whatever you call it. It is the idea that it's government's job. Somehow government's job over the last 50 years has basically transferred from advocacy for the safety, health, and well-being of our people and our planet, and by extension, other people in the world, to this constant acquiescence because of the donations that these huge industrial empires can give. Our Congress has become little more than a system of legalized bribery, where time and time again, our policies do more to support and to enable the short-term profit maximization of these huge corporate entities than to serve the people. We have changed from any kind of a humanitarian or ethical bottom line to an economic bottom line. And the pain and suffering and despair and anxiety and even death that this is causing millions and millions and millions of people is unacceptable. Going back to that same group of people one more time, saying, come on, guys, you can do better, is simply not enough. We are now at the edge of the cliff, and the American people have a right to say, no, we're going to make an economic U-turn now. And if I'm president, we will.
And when we talk about capitalism, and in some regards, Adam Smith's work is in large part a part of the foundation of American capitalism, and he used the term the invisible hand. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, I could say most of the time, for far too many Americans, how government works, how capitalism works is an invisible hand to them. They really don't know how either the political or the economic system works. And so, and Mark Curious, we're joined by Mark Curious, Bird, and Mark Curious, especially in terms of the South Carolina experience. Feel free to weigh in about this invisible hand. I mean, I talk with people, and people don't even know who their state representative is, who their congressional representative is. They have no idea whatsoever. The Inflation Reduction Act, which has a $859 billion budget. People have no idea what that money is going to go towards and what issues it's supposed to be dealing with, or Justice 40, President Biden's executive, which comes out of President Biden's executive order. They have no idea what 40% of benefits are and how that can or cannot benefit them. So the whole concept, I say from the very beginning, that invisible hand is a large part of the problem. We used to have civics. We used to have civics classes, so we knew how government works, but they don't teach that in class anymore, right?
Yeah, from my understanding, a lot of that is not being taught, at least to a sufficient level here in South Carolina, so that we can learn what our government is doing. So a lot of people do feel the effect of the invisible hand in their everyday life because they aren't informed about what is going on in these bills, in these acts over time.
Right, absolutely. And
I
then,
know,
okay, I'm sorry, Maryanne, go ahead. Mhm.
well, I know that when I was running before, there were 11 states in the Union where not even half a year of American civics, American history, or American government was required. And that might even be worse now, because in the ensuing years since that last campaign, as we know, there are forces, and they're certainly present in South Carolina and throughout the South and throughout other places as well, where there are efforts to actively suppress the learning of history. It's not just neglecting the teaching of history, it is very selectively teaching it, even when it's presented to the children. Obviously, when it comes to Black history, when it comes to the history of slavery and the civil rights movement and things such as that, critical race theory and all of that ridiculousness that some people are introducing into our national struggle. You know, our struggle should always be for greater freedom, more liberties, more democracy. And we're now living at a time when there are people literally trying to limit our rights, diminish our rights, whether it has to do with Black people, whether it has to do with women, whether it has to do with LGBTQ, transgender. We're living at a time when there is not only an effort to retell, redesign, re-engineer our past, but to also engineer our future in ways that are very un-American and very contrary to our traditional values.
Right, absolutely. And it's always history, or the revision of history, also always based on who tells the story. Quickly, I remember the story of the deer hunter who went hunting, saw a magnificent buck, raised his rifle, shot the deer fell down. He went to collect his trophy, and the deer reared up and began to beat him with antlers and hoof. And the next day in the human community, the headline read, deer savagely maims and mauls hunters. But in the deer community, their newspaper read, victim attacks and wounds serial killer. So depending on who's telling the story is important. And when we don't get the real, when we do not receive an adequate recounting of stories in history, we're bound to, as they said, when you don't know your history, you're bound to just experience once again the same impacts. And I think there's no better example right now in this point in time than what's going on in the banking industry. In 2008, we almost went into a depression because of the banking crisis. And now with Silicon Valley Bank almost failing completely, and Republic Bank and a couple of more really large banks having to be bailed out. Once again, we have not learned our history. So what do you think of of this current banking crisis?
Well, when you talk about the history there, the history that matters, of course, goes back to the end of the Depression, when President Roosevelt and some very wise and sober people did institute laws, rules, regulations that were meant to prevent us from ever having that kind of financial failure again. And one of them was the institution of what was called Glass-Steagall. And Glass-Steagall was created to make sure that banks took your money and then they couldn't go invest that money. That the money that you deposit in the bank had to be kept separate from money that the bank could go invest and play with. That was repealed under the presidency of Bill Clinton. And there has been since that time just a constant chipping away in this industry, as in so many others, from the guardrails, from the regulation. That's what we're talking about here, whether you're talking about banking or anything else. It's just they keep coming. They say, oh, we don't need that regulation. We don't need that regulation. We don't need that regulation. And they, in most industries, they call it job killing regulation. So they try to convince people that if you let those regulations stand, we'll have less money to hire you. In the terms of banking, these forces, the banking financial industry, has been very, very powerful. And related specifically to the failure at the Silicon Valley, of course, had to do with the fact that it had been that the government guaranteed and had oversight over $250 billion. And the banking industry kept lobbying, no, they should only have oversight up to 50 billion. And after that, we should be on our own. And that's very much the crisis, what created the crisis here at the Silicon Valley Bank. And, you know, people like Barney Frank, it's unbelievable, the revolving door policy. Barney Frank, when he was a congressman, had helped to, it was called the Dodd-Frank bill that had been created in order to control the banks. Then when he was no longer in Congress, he went to actually work for banks to help. I know, it's unbelievable. He said, well, I had to make a living in order to defeat those very regulations. So, you know, people, of course, need to feel that they're, when they deposit money in a bank, that the money is safe. And so making the depositors whole was, I think, the correct thing to do. But many of the people, such as Peter Thiel, you know, that big billionaire Trump supporter, he actually had a lot of money invested in these tech companies that were putting their money in that bank. And then he was the one who actually called the run on the bank. So it's very important that while the depositors get made whole, it's important that the banking executives, some of whom gave themselves multi-million-dollar bonuses right before the fall and right after the fall, it's important that they not get those bonuses. And it's important that the tech investors, who themselves caused the run on the bank, not get the benefit of the fact that the depositors were made whole.
Right, and because of the way that the banking industry treats people, there's not a lot of confidence among the American people. You know, almost half of the people, and I have to say now, it might be half or more than half of Americans don't own a banking account. They don't have a bank account. You know, we have 4% of the U.S. population. Not only are they unbanked, they also don't have their money deposited in credit unions. And out of this 4% of people who are unbanked, no one in their household, their children, their spouses, their partners, no one has a bank account. And so the other thing is that when you look at what the banking industry has to offer everyday folks who are depositors, you roughly, you know, if you're lucky, you'll get 1% interest. And I don't think people realize that if you put $1 million into a bank account, which you shouldn't do because it's only federally insured for $250,000. But if you put $1 million and deposit it into a bank account at 1% interest, at the end of the year, you only made $100 on your $1 million. You know, you can at 3% interest, you can invest into a 13-month CD. And at the end of those 13 months, you will have made a whopping $179 in profit. And I mean, you know, I've told people in the past, I can sit on the side of the road and sell more than $179 worth of peaches, you know, in less than 13 months. And then we have the fact that disparities between people of color and the majority, the white population, where they pay disproportionately high rates on banking charges and fees. For blacks, up to $12 a month on average, and $14 a month for our members of the brown community. And the white community is about 5%. And so I'm raising that so that, folks should realize that the money of everyday depositors, which should be untouched completely, that amount of money has shrunk, dramatically, because people don't have confidence in the American banking system. Am I correct about that?
Well, I think you're obviously correct that they don't have trust in the American banking system, and unfortunately, for some very good reasons that you just mentioned. And regulating banks so that they actually are working for the people rather than working for a very few Americans who are able to play with their money in ways that the vast majority of Americans cannot. That's an example of the kind of overreach of all forms of capital that has occurred over the last 50 years, and that has to be pushed back. This is just one of many ways that our policies make it easier for people who already have a lot to get more, and harder for people who do not have to even make it at all.
Right. So this run that began with Silicon Valley, I believe, talking with people who are a lot smarter than I am on this, said that a lot of the investments were long-term investments. And so when people, not everyday people, but when people call for their money, they had a hard time because their investments were tied up long-term. In 2008, it was different. It was the housing crisis, because what they did was they made horrible mortgage loans. And I remember the head of the Fed at that time saying that for the bankers, a rolling loan gathers no loss. Because what they would do was package all these bad mortgage loans, and some of the terms they used then was low doc loans, meaning you only needed a few documents. And what horrified me was, at one point, because we were doing a first-time home buyers program, they went to no doc loans. You didn't need any documents at all. You didn't even need to prove that you had a job if you had a big enough down payment. And so they took these horrible loans and they packaged them with good loans, and they'd sell them to a bank or to a secondary loan manager. And when they looked at all of them, they found out this is horrible. And they would just sell them to someone else, and they would just do that, a rolling loan, until it not only impacted America, but the banking system globally. So I say that because, I want people to realize it's not just one way that this problem is occurring, but we have at least two examples of bad investments that put everyday people's deposits at risk. But because they're too big to fail, they were able to get bailed out. But if we fail with our financial, handlings, how we handle our money, our credit, our debt, etc., who bails us out? No one bails us out.
Well, the situation there was even worse because it was predatory. I mean, many of those people who were given those bad loans, I mean, it was a very predatory system. And then another example of the corruption involved there is the fact that the Obama administration didn't choose to hold accountable the people who were truly responsible for all of that. So not only were forces allowed to create that destruction, but then they were basically let off scot-free. It was truly an example of the system at work, doing its dirty work and then protecting itself so that no one would pay.
Absolutely. So talking about paying, we're really paying now when it comes to the impact of climate change. One of the things that I really regret is that if you want to know what's going on globally, you have to keep changing your television channel. So for me to know what's going on in the world, I listen to the national news. It tells me some things. Then I have to turn to BBC to find out more about what's going on in the world. You have your local news, etc. But everyone should realize by now in this country that climate change is real, because literally every day in this country there is some climate impact. It could be severe cold and a lot of snow in California, or wildfires in California, or drought in the Colorado River Basin in the Mississippi, or tornadoes, or straight line winds, or hurricanes, or heat waves, or torrential rains, just on and on, sea level rise, etc. And so, but the thing that I'm saying is that while there's a global effort through the United Nations FCC and the and the Council of Parties, or COP as people know it, that this is going on across the planet, and a lot of the immigration that we see, and the mistelling of stories that say these people are just criminals, they just want to get in our country to kill us and rob us, that's a global phenomena. Around the world, people are moving from the South northwards, from the Caribbean, South America, Central America, Mexico. And then we see the same thing happening in the Middle East and Africa. And when people move up into Europe, we see the same thing with islands that are, because of sea level rise, are becoming uninhabitable, and people are moving in Southeastern Asia from the south upwards. And so climate change is an issue I know you speak about a lot, and that scientists have called an existential problem, meaning it can impact the very existence of every life on this planet and civilization as we know it. So, what changes, what steps do you think we need to make with climate change, and uh, setting these deadlines that keep moving back, can kick down the road 2030, 2050? How does your campaign address or look at the issue of climate change, environmental injustice, etc.?
Well, as you just said, scientists of the world, UN report and so forth, have given what they call their final warning. They keep giving us these final warnings. They could not do more than they're doing to shout as loudly as possible, you're going to kill yourself, humanity. You're on a path of disaster. We are now at a point where if we don't radically change our ways, the greenhouse emissions that we are putting into the air could cause environmental disaster over the next 10 to 20 years, which basically takes out entire swaths of the planet, like you were talking about, mainly the global south. There could be entire swaths of continents in Africa and elsewhere, which are literally uninhabitable due to the heat. And when that happens, of course, you have an implosion of the food system, you have an implosion of the economic system, and then you have the economic refugees that you were just referring to. There could be up to 200 million. And of course, countries in the north and places that are not doing as poorly in terms of the environment would not be able to absorb all that wave of humanity. So this is this is a path of self-destruction, completely unnecessary, completely human created on the level that we're talking about, unlike anything we've seen on the planet. So what you have is someone like our president who is willing to say what you just said. Yes, it's an existential crisis. Because at this point, Leo, any thinking person gets that it's an existential crisis. It threatens literally the existence of our children and grandchildren. And yet the president has given more oil drilling permits in his time in office than even Trump had at this point. And he just approved stunningly, and nobody can even believe this that I know, he has approved an $8 billion ConocoPhillips oil drilling, fossil fuel extraction plant on the North Slope of Alaska. That will be so catastrophic in an environmental sense, that even though the president's Inflation Reduction Act did give quite a bit of money, nice money actually, to green investments, the benefit of those investments is basically nullified. It's basically nullified, first of all, by the Willow Project. And also, let's remember the $858 billion defense budget that we have in this country. The U.S. Defense Department is the single largest institutional emitter of carbon greenhouse gases on the planet. So we're at a point now where the Republicans just deny it, just deny it's even important. They call it a hoax. But too many of the corporate Democrats will admit, and this unfortunately is too many of the corporate Democrats, what we call the dinos. Oh, they'll admit the problem, but they act as though if I admit the problem with my left hand, then on my right hand, it's like a purse thief. You won't notice that not only am I doing nothing to solve the problem, but in some ways I'm making it even worse. So the first thing I would do as president on day one, I would cancel the Willow Project. And I would work very hard to convince the American people that we need a mass mobilization, the same as we mobilized for World War II. We need to mobilize in order to make a just transition from a dirty economy to a clean economy. We have to go from a dirty energy grid to a clean energy grid, and we can. But we need leadership. We need people who are willing, first of all, to be honest with the American people. When you look, you were talking before, Leo, about history, right? And when you read American history, one of the things that fascinates me with great presidents is they knew that they would not be able to achieve what they wanted to achieve unless they could enroll the American people in the larger vision. That was true of Lincoln when it came to the abolition of slavery, and it was true with Franklin Roosevelt in terms of World War II. The president is not a dictator. The president can't just go in and say, we're going to have it this way because I say. You have to inspire people, you have to motivate people, and you have to convince people. And in some cases, you have to educate people. And that's why the bully pulpit is so important. So I think the American people have to be awakened, number one, to the severity of the problem, but number two, to the realization we can still turn this around, but we must not tarry. There can't just be these incremental changes, such as the president is introducing some investment in green energy over here and then approving the Willow Project over there. It's too late for that. And I think, one of the things that I have experienced, I had this experience in South Carolina. I've had it everywhere I've spoken for quite a while now. I will say to a room, I'm going to ask you to raise your hands in a minute if something is true. And I'd like you to keep your hands raised so everybody can hear it, see it. And that is, I'll say, please raise your hand if you are a young person or you know a young person who has ever said the following. Under normal circumstances, I would be thinking of having children. But given the state of the planet, I think I shouldn't bring a child into this world. And Leo, you wouldn't believe, and this is true in South Carolina as much as how many hands raised? Hands go up. And I say to people, exactly. And I say to people, please look around the room. This is not normal. This is not normal. And as president, I would work to convince people and mobilize people that we must not tarry. It's time to turn this around. This is not a time, as with the Willow Project, to be ramping up fossil fuel extraction. This is time to start ramping down fossil fuel extraction. And when I'm president, that's what's going to happen.
That's wonderful. It's so needed. And I don't, part of the problem, and we're not just talking about Congress, we're talking about elected officials on both sides of the aisle. Is that, they're not telling people, okay, we got to stop burning coal and oil and gas because the emissions from them that's what's causing these problems. They just say, oh, we're going to switch from gasoline to electric vehicles. And we see it happening all around the world. And then they're also not explaining to people what's going on. They're not explaining what you said, that yes, we're giving a little money for solar and for those kind of investments and innovations, but we're continuing to burn oil and coal and the natural or frack gas industry is actually expanding like the biomass wood pellet industry is, and they're not explaining these things to the American public. But people need to ask themselves, why is it that we have to make these dramatic shifts? And I think a part of the problem is because our elected officials locally, all the way up to Congress, are so concerned about being reelected, their careers, and they forget the fact that people elected them to office to push the envelope, to make change, and that all the great leaders politically, spiritually and morally, Dr. King and others were willing to take on unpopular causes and unpopular issues. And that's what made them great and historic. But I fear that many of the people that we elect to office, once they become a part of the system, they think that, oh well, I'm a part of the system now, and if they attack the system, they're attacking me. And they forget the fact that no, we didn't send you to your elected office to be a part of the system. We sent you to we elected you to office because we want you to represent the people and the people who voted for you, not the developers on the local level, not the large corporations, not the economic institution, but we elected you to protect and support and to help people, because people are what makes democracy. The word democracy literally means the rule of people. And so I think that's a large part of the problem, is that a lot of our elected officials are more concerned about how they stay in office, how they protect their images, rather than being willing to stand out there and be the voice crying in the wilderness.
Well, you kind of describe almost a fairy tale version of democracy that hasn't existed for quite a while in this country, and that's what people are coming to understand. Our Congress, our system is basically a system of legalized bribery at this point, because the influence, the undue financial influence of all these corporate forces is so gargantuan that at this point, the legislators do not usually seek to serve their constituents if and when the will of the constituents, however clear it might be made to them, is contrary to the will of their donors. And
Well,
this is not just a maybe kind of sort of, this is just the way it is now. And that's why it's going to take a massive uprising on the consciousness of the people to override this at this point. We need to become as focused on the repeal of Citizens United.
That's what I was going to say. Can you explain that? Because a lot of people, everyday folks, they don't know about Citizens United. They don't know how it works. They don't know how this gives more power and influence to corporations than it does to people. So can you just explain that to folks who are listening, who don't know what Citizens United came about and why it is a threat to our democracy?
Well, it's not just a threat to our democracy. In many ways, it has already destroyed our democracy. We are now functioning less as a democracy and more as an oligarchy, or basically ruled by the rich. The Citizens United, and there were a lot of things that built up to the Citizens United case, but it was several years ago when the Supreme Court basically gave unlimited power to corporations through super PACs and through and other dark money routes, the power to influence elections. So let's look at it this way. So I don't take corporate money. The only way I can have a campaign that's filled with integrity is if I do not take corporate money. And the maximum donation that anyone could give to my campaign, my presidential campaign, is $3,300. Okay. But other campaigns are being supported in the background by what's called dark money, super PACs, et cetera, by millions and millions and millions of dollars. And all of that is possible now because of the Supreme Court decision called Citizens United. Now,
So I can
what I-
only give you 3,300, but
Right.
say if you want.
somebody else will be getting 3 million, right?
Yeah, the pharmaceutical.
And the 3,
industry
right,
could give you
right,
3 million,
right, right. Now, they wouldn't even want to for me, obviously, because they know what I stand for, and they will be giving millions and millions of dollars to the people who oppose what I stand for. That's why the only way around this, Leo, is a massive uprising of people who are willing to just go to the polls and say, we're voting for this no matter what. So right now, I think the people, we the people, need to become as serious and as goal-oriented about one day repealing Citizens United as others that we know of were intent over the last few years on repealing Roe v. Wade. I think that one issue, because the money in politics is the cancer underlying all the cancers. And to me, one of the most tragic consequences of Trump's presidency is that he got 3 opportunities in his one term. I mean, that's almost unheard of. He had in his 4 years in office the chance to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices. And they were all very corporate backed, very corporate centric. We were all kind of surprised the other day because Kavanaugh actually on an issue involving Stephen Donziger and Chevron actually came down with a decision that was on the side of the people as opposed to the corporations, but that's rare. And then you had Ketanji Brown Jackson. This was a shock to everybody. Ketanji Brown Jackson voted with the corporations. This was just last week, and it kind of blew everybody's mind and was extremely disappointing. But the point is that as long as Citizens United is in place, the only way we can override that is 2 things. First of all, a massive uprising of people who are willing to go to the polls, who are willing to support the non-corporate backed candidates. And then the other issue is that one day there needs to be a constitutional amendment that establishes public funding for federal campaigns. Some of the people who should be in office now, the people who were kind of like when you were talking about the experts, we should have more environmental scientists. Environmental scientists should be in office. People who teachers should be in office. More people who are actually experts in creating the real solutions to some of the worst problems that confront us have no real even possibility of raising the kind of money that overrides the forces that will be trying to squash them because they're resisting corporate control.
Right. But money, and I've said this in regards to local elections, and it even, money does not vote. People vote. And there has been so many occasions when as in your case, I mean, I'm just going to be, candid. People don't believe you can win because of the large corporate forces and all the money it takes to run for election. But look, people didn't think that Barack Obama could win. People didn't think that Donald Trump could win. We've had, our local mayoral election here. People didn't think that she could win. Mayor Irving could win. But the fact of the matter is that the power that is still dominant in this country, even though dominant, let me say, when we use it, that power is the power of our vote. And
well,
so.
This whole business, somebody can't win, someone is a long shot. As you said, Donald Trump won. Talk about a long shot. And as you pointed out, Barack Obama was considered a long shot. So that's just part of the narrative that people, it's almost like a spell that is cast. Oh, someone can't win. Someone could never win. I don't know if you know, Leo, but yesterday, a major A-rated polls came out saying that I'm at 10%, which has made a lot of national news media today. There was an article in Newsweek about it. So we're out there. We'll win if the people vote for me. And there's no powerlessness, like this internalized sense of powerlessness where somebody just convinces you there's no point in voting for someone. If you vote for that person, then they will win. And I was in South Carolina not long ago, And South Carolinians are very aware, obviously, that you are the most important set of voters in the country right now. When it will come to these primaries, you will be first in the nation this year, as far as the Democratic Party is concerned. Now, New Hampshire will still have that. New Hampshire and South Carolina can have that friendly competition over the title. But be that as it may, the DNC is engineering the primary schedule in a way that even gives more importance to South Carolina. So if the South Carolinian voters decide, no, we're going to have a different conversation, we think we need something much more vibrant to face the Republicans in 2024, genuine economic reform. Right now, the president's agenda, he always tries to make it easier for people. He has a good heart, I think, and he is trying to help people survive the stress of living chronically at the effect of an unjust economic system. I want to do more than help people survive an unjust system. I want to end the injustice. And that's why my campaign stands for universal health care, which the president said he would veto. He said he would veto Medicare for all if it came to his desk. I want tuition-free college, which we had in this country until the 1960s. I want free childcare. I want paid family leave, guaranteed sick pay, guaranteed livable wage. All of those things are moderate positions in every other advanced democracy, and they should be in ours as well.
Well, you brought up South Carolina primary, and I like to see if Maryanne can weigh in on this, because I don't, people have such short memories because they're not tuned into history. But let's remember that that Barack Obama was not leading until after the South Carolina primary. Joe Biden was not leading until after the South Carolina primary. So Marcurius Bird, talk to us. South Carolina seems to have a special impact when it comes to primaries. Of course, who wins the person who wins the primary is going to be the candidate for the presidency. So what is it about South Carolina? What are some of the things that makes South Carolina so unique when it comes to primaries?
So one of the things that I think that makes South Carolina so unique when it comes to the primary is the diversity of both our thought processes and our demographics. So we just don't have monolithic groups of, let's say, white people or Black people or some other type of group. We have a very diverse set of people here. We have 46 counties. Each of these 46 counties are very different, very similar to the 50 states that we have across the nation. So from like a campaign perspective, South Carolina is important and can pick a president, because when you go talk to these voters in the 46 counties, and we're talking about Maryanne and how her policies will help the people in South Carolina, that will give them a voice and a choice to hear something that people normally don't hear from their candidates, especially when we go talk to them. Just like we went to Florence, we went to Lancaster. We're making the stops to talk to the people in the 46 counties, because each of these 46 counties kind of represents one of the 50 states. And that gives us a chance to voice Maryanne's campaign policies to all the different counties.
Absolutely, because when you look at New Hampshire and you look at Iowa that preceded, came before the South Carolina primary, they in no way represent the diversity of this country. And so that is one of the most powerful things. And I know we're running out of time. But I want you to talk, since we're talking about South Carolina, and South Carolina is in the Bible Belt, and you have a lot of people who describe themselves as people of faith. And, you have written so many books that deal with spirituality. Why don't you tell our audience about what connections or what points of commonality you find between South Carolinians and yourself when it comes to faith?
Well, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says, justice, justice thou shalt pursue. To love justice, to do mercy, to walk humbly with thy God. There is no love where there is no justice. We do not have environmental justice in this country. We do not have racial justice in this country. We do not have economic justice in this country. We do not have criminal justice in this country. And so to me, to talk about the path of the heart, to talk about faith, you know, God doesn't want us to just love God. God wants us to love each other. And love is not just something you feel, it's something that you do. Don't talk to me about love. Don't talk to me about faith. Don't talk to me about God if you're not willing to feed a hungry child. So there is tremendous religious hypocrisy in this country today. When I was growing up, there was a vital religious right, but there was also a vital religious left. And I think we need a revival today among those who feel that public issues, such as economic justice, are moral issues, are spiritual issues. And there is no way we can be true to the faith in our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence, but there's also no way that we can live in good faith to the God of our Father if we do not recognize that the commandment to love one another applies to our political policies and decision-making as much as it applies to our individual behavior.
So are you, in a sense, calling on faith leaders and people of faith, much in the manner that Martin Luther King did with his letter from a Birmingham jail, when you said we need a revival of the faith community, that we had a right wing of faith, a left wing of faith. And I know Dr. King would be bemoaning the fact from his jail cell that faith leaders were not more involved in terms of dealing with justice and ethics and morality.
And he was responding to the fact that it was faith leaders who were saying, Martin, you need to slow down. And he was telling them, slow down. We need to revolutionize the economic landscape of this country. And we need to revolutionize the economic landscape of our country today as well. One of my favorite quotes from him, and please forgive me because I hate to paraphrase King and get it wrong, but it was something along this line. Any religion that purports to care about the souls of man, but does not address the economic conditions that shackle him and the social conditions that shackle him and the economic conditions that damn him, something like that, is a moribund religion awaiting burial.
Right. I remember that quote. He said that is a dead religion that just has not been buried, that you can't just care about your spiritual condition. You can't just care about your family's spiritual condition. But again, looking at the Christian, Christian faith, you know, when the enemies of Jesus Christ came to him and said, out of these 615 laws in the first five books of the Bible, which is the greatest, trying to trap him, and he said it all boils down to two things: love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. On these two things depend all of the law and everything a prophet has ever said. And so I look at you today as one of the prophets, you know, who is doing two things. You're, like all prophets do, you're calling out and you're saying, this is the way to truth and righteousness in a better world with us and a better spiritual relationship. And on the other hand, I have to cry out doom and gloom if we don't change the direction of the path that we're on. And so with that being said, I'm being told that we're running out of time again. You're coming back to Florence?
I am. I'm coming back to various places in South Carolina. I'll leave it to Marcurius to say exactly what they are. But people can go to our website at Maryanne 2024 and sign up, and we will be sending you notices of when I'm coming and where I'll be. Mercurius, I'm going to throw it over to you to say where I'll be going this next time I visit and when, if you have that information in front of you.
I guess so. Currently working on the schedule. So Maryanne will be back here in Charleston on the 27th. Then we'll be back in Columbia on the 28th for the SCDP convention weekend. So we'll be here in Columbia on the 28th and the 29th.
Okay, great. And you know, our doors of our church are open, you know, and so if you ever need a place to come when you're in Florence, you know, we offer space in our place to anyone who is running for office.
Well, thank you. I remember when I was at your place, and I remember loving it, and the church and the people there and your family. So I very much look forward to it. You and I bonded during the last campaign, and it gives me great pleasure that we've reconnected for this next time around. And I acknowledge you, Reverend, and all the things that you have done to plant seeds in the hearts and the minds of so many people. There are a lot of seeds out there. There are a lot of open hearts and open minds all over this country. And I think that there is a possibility of an inflection point. There is a possibility of a great turning. And I look forward to working with you for all the things that we can do, and with all your listeners as well, so that we can bring it about in our lifetime.
Well, thank you so much. I do believe that we're on the verge of a great historic change, and we have to push for it because the alternative is completely unacceptable to all life.
Amen to that. Amen, amen, amen. May it be so.
All right, so thank you very much.
God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you. So hold on just a second. To our audience, thank you so much for once again joining us for the Leo and Larry show. We want to give our guest Maryanne Williamson, who's a candidate for the U.S. presidency, to share with folks how they can contact you, your website, etc. And then I'll sign off. Okay.
Okay, I hope everybody will go to Maryanne2024.com, and Maryanne is Marianne, and sign up on my, with your address and your, email and all of that. We'll let you know when I'm there, and I look forward to being back in South Carolina. It was exciting the times I've been there before, and I'm looking forward to doing it again.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, our host, my friend, my buddy, my co-host, Larry Smith, could not be with us this evening, but I'm Leo Woodbury. And if you wish to contact me, you can go to info@newalphacdc.com, or you can subscribe to our website and keep up with the things we're doing with our nonprofit at newalphacdc.com. Or you can even call us at our church, Kingdom Living Temple, 843-799-0740. And so until next week, this time, we invite you to come back and listen to the show that tells you the things you need to know and the places you need to go on the Leo and Larry show. Thank you very much. God bless. And we'll see you next week. We'll be with you next week.
It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo and Larry show. It's about what you know. It's about where you go. If you really want to know, it's the Leo and Larry show.